Hello, my name is Lindsay Reed, and I will be discussing the return on investment as it relates to instructional design. What is a return on investment? Return on investment is a performance measure used to evaluate the efficiency of an investment or compare the efficiency of a number of different investments. How does the ROI apply to instructional design? An ROI is used to evaluate lesson plans. And we know that instructional design helps us to create these lesson plans. So an ROI is used at the end where we are evaluating and referring to, yeah, we gotta cut that. How does an ROI apply to instructional design? An ROI is used to evaluate lesson plans. So this is at the very last step of our instructional design when we are reflecting upon our lessons. How can we incorporate these into our lessons as we move forward as well? First, we need to think about is the time. How much time are we investing in our lesson planning? And most of the time, the ROI is avoided because the amount of time it takes. This last step takes a huge amount of time, and educators most of the time do not have that extra time to go back and review their work. Next is learner retention, and what are thinking about what are the impacts and what is the return when they are being able to retain that knowledge. Student engagement. Learners make an investment when they participate in learning activities. We'll go deeper into that in a second. Lastly is class morale. So as we think about this, so how much time did you invest? So first thing we want to think about is our planning period. Are we utilizing that time to fully invest in planning our lessons for our students? Or are we ending up taking it home and just doing a quick lesson altogether? I know my planning period's in the morning, so I tend to put everything together the morning of. That's not the best thing to do. We need to utilize that planning period to plan ahead and to make a cohesive unit for our students. Next is student involvement, gathering that feedback and opinions so that we can improve upon our lessons for them. Next is learner retention. When we're teaching, are the students' opinion heard and incorporated? A couple things we can do to make sure that they know that their opinions are heard and known. Google Forms, I love it, especially with digital learning right now. It's a great tool to be utilizing, or you can use a simple ticket out the door. Ticket out the doors are nice little slips of paper or whiteboards students can write on that they can quickly share their observations with you. Next, what are your expectations for your students? Are the students aware of their own abilities? Have you been encouraging them? Have you been digging deep into those abilities, into their strengths in your classroom so that they can thrive? Do they know what their abilities are? If you've been able to see them, you need to encourage them and show that is where their strengths are and that they lie right there inside of them and that they can be an impactful students. Next, what are the impacts and what are the returns? So when we're talking about the impacts of our students, so how did our lessons affect the students overall, not only as an individual and their individual grade, but as a whole? Was it widely accepted and understood? Or thinking about it as a single lesson, how did it affect the unit? If students did not understand, do we need to go back and re-dissect that lesson and reteach it to our students? Maybe a different where they are able to take in that knowledge and understand it, and be able to produce what we know they're capable of. Next, what was the return? So when we're talking about return, we need to think about the performance metric. This is used to compare students' performances. We're comparing students' performances. This can be in a couple different outcomes. We can look at a specific exam and compare those amongst the students. Was it a small percentage that didn't get it? Was it an overall? You can look at letter grades. So what did their grades jump? Did they go up? Did they go down? Are they improving? Are we just staying the same? Same with grade point average. Did it affect their grade as a whole? Um, did it affect the class's grade point average? Whatever it may be, you need that comparison to be able to evaluate your lessons. Next is student engagement. Again, students are the stakeholders in their learning, and we have to remember that as educators. We're not there just to provide them with information and new ways of learning. We are there because it's their learning they're there for. Um, Next, have we incorporated and ensured students' opinions are incorporated? Are we making sure that when we take those Google Forms and exit tickets and class discussions and everything, that we are actually incorporating it into our lessons, our next units, and making sure that we know we hear them and that we are incorporating that into the lesson to benefit them. Next is providing students with options. I have seen great improvement in my students just by providing them with 2 or 3 simple options when they are going to produce an end result for our units, whether that be building, creating something new, and discussing that with the class and how they did it and how that applies back to our lesson from the day or the week, whatever it was, just providing them with their own way of presenting their understanding to the class has greatly improved their participation in my classroom. Next is looking at the class morale and understanding that you're not just teaching one individual, but you're teaching them as a whole. And one way to gather their responses and to understand them as a whole is Google Forms again. Great tool. Class discussion. So maybe at the end of a class period, take a day just to discuss how lessons are going, how they're receiving them, what they're understanding, what they're not. Exit ticket, nice quick thing at the end of a class, making sure we read them as a teacher and going through them and incorporating some suggestions or new techniques to get them engaged, or have them in small group discussions and then have one person from each group come and tell you what was received and what they would prefer to see in the next unit. Finally, how does this improve lessons? When we're thinking of an ROI, it is a lengthy process as we see, but how does this improve our lessons for the future? Students know they are heard. When you are constantly asking for their opinions and they see that incorporated in future lessons, they will be more aware and want to be more engaged in your class. Next is the data. The data will show you these things or what to change. And lastly, constant revision and reflection. Again, thinking about what you can change and what you can improve upon during those planning periods, and how you can incorporate new ways of learning and utilizing every inch of your time to benefit your students. Um, Thank you so much for listening. These are my references that I used for this. Again, thank you, and have a nice evening.